Coastlines appear deceptively simple, a line where land meets water, a boundary between two different worlds. But for human systems, coastlines have rarely functioned as boundaries. This is Achronic, a long-form documentary series about power, geography, and time. Not events, not heroes, not chronology, structures that outlast empires. Across centuries, coastlines have repeatedly attracted settlement, trade, and political attention, not because of cultural preference and not because of coincidence, but because coastlines compress movement. They concentrate the transition between maritime networks and inland territories into narrow corridors where exchange becomes unavoidable. The sea allows movement across enormous distances with relatively low friction. Maritime space behaves differently from land. On land, movement is constantly interrupted by terrain, ownership, borders, and infrastructure that must be constructed and maintained. At sea, the surface itself functions as a vast corridor where distance can be traversed with comparatively fewer obstacles. This difference reshapes geography. Regions separated by thousands of kilometers of water may interact more easily than regions divided by mountains only a few hundred kilometers apart. As a result, coastlines become the places where these two fundamentally different systems of movement intersect. And where those two systems meet, something powerful happens. Flow converges. Ships arrive carrying goods, people, and information from distant regions. From the shore, those flows disperse inland through roads, rivers, and valleys that connect the coast to the interior. This constant convergence transforms coastlines into structural gateways. Not every stretch of coastline becomes important. Most coastlines remain quiet, but certain segments repeatedly accumulate activity across long periods of time. Harbors form where the geography allows ships to anchor safely. Access routes develop where terrain permits movement inland. Settlements grow where these two systems intersect, and gradually these locations begin to acquire a gravitational pull. Trade gravitates toward them. Once activity concentrates in these locations, a reinforcing cycle begins. Merchants prefer routes that connect established hubs. Infrastructure develops where demand is already visible. Information circulates faster where networks are dense. Each layer of activity strengthens the previous one. Over decades and centuries, this accumulation transforms certain coastlines into structural anchors for entire regions. The result is not merely economic importance, but systemic centrality. Remove the coastline node, and the surrounding networks struggle to reorganize themselves. Population concentrates around them. Political power eventually follows. Empires often appear to control vast inland territories. Yet again and again, their most critical nodes emerge along the edges of continents. Because maritime movement reorganizes space in a way that terrestrial systems alone cannot. Sea routes connect regions that would otherwise remain distant. They compress distance. They amplify exchange. They transform coastlines into interfaces between entire worlds. This is why coastal cities often appear disproportionately influential compared to their physical size. They do not simply serve nearby regions. They connect networks that extend far beyond the horizon. Over time, these networks stabilize. Ports become hubs. Hubs become corridors. Corridors become systems that structure economic and political life across entire regions. Even when technologies change, the fundamental logic of coastlines rarely disappears. Ships become faster. Cargo becomes larger. Navigation becomes more precise, but the underlying geography remains the same. The interface between sea and land continues to concentrate movement, and wherever movement concentrates, power eventually accumulates. Attempts to ignore these structural nodes rarely succeed. Political systems may attempt to redirect trade. They may attempt to privilege inland centers. They may attempt to reorganize territory according to administrative priorities. But the gravitational pull of coastlines continues to reassert itself, because coastlines are not merely edges of continents. They are hinges, points where entire systems of movement pivot between two different environments. This is why coastlines repeatedly attract attention from systems of power. Control of a coastline does not simply mean access to the sea. It means influence over the interface where global movement enters terrestrial space. From these interfaces, flows can be redirected, taxed, protected, or interrupted. And because those flows connect distant regions, the influence of a coastline can extend far beyond its immediate geography. The shoreline becomes less a boundary and more a hinge upon which larger systems rotate. Empires rise and fall, political orders change, technologies evolve, but coastlines remain what they have always been: interfaces between worlds. And wherever those interfaces persist, human systems continue to reorganize themselves around them.